Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996. Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Today we dedicate the merit of our practice to Joe Kakulka, who was a longtime practitioner and our webmaster for several decades. And along with George Hubbard, started our online archive of talks, which now includes over 500 talks freely offered to the world. Before we begin, it's our tradition to go around and say our names. My name's Tom.
My name is Mark.
George.
Steve.
Kevin.
Mark.
Don.
Tony.
Jim.
Michael.
Tim.
Matthew. Stephen.
Tim.
I'm Hal.
I'm Mike.
I'm Richard.
I'm Paul.
I'm Bob.
Jay.
Clint.
Joe.
Rob. Don.
I'm Chuck. Ray. Jack.
Sutwell.
I'm David.
I'm Lee.
Tom.
My name is Cass.
Jim. Ivan.
Greg.
I'm Kay.
David. I'm Henry.
I'm Izzy.
My name is Rich.
I'm Brad.
I'm Guy Allen.
I'm Jay. My name is Michael.
Andrew.
David.
John.
My name is Jerry. Larry.
I'm Ed.
And Pat.
Harry.
David.
Stephen.
Anybody else hiding? Okay, just by a show of hands, is there anybody here for the first time? Izzy? And Stephen?
And Chuck.
And Jeff. We'll try and remember your names and make you feel welcome at our social period afterwards. So today we have the great privilege of having back with us Tom Moon. Tom has been a practitioner of Vipassana meditation for 15 years, and his spiritual home is Spirit Rock Meditation Center. He's a psychologist in San Francisco, working primarily with gay men. His chief commitment is in exploring the interface between Buddhist practice and psychotherapy. Tom, it's so good to have you back.
Thank you. I sent an updated bio, but you didn't get it. It's been 22 years now, so. Yeah, otherwise it's all the same. Yes, it's too short, yes. 7 years longer.
Yeah.
Anyway. Good morning. So what I'd like to talk about today are two things. A little bit about the relationship between Buddhist practice and religious/spiritual beliefs, and then a little bit about what the Dharma is apart from all that, because it's kind of up for me. I gave myself the assignment a few years back of writing down in great English what my spiritual beliefs are that have been developing over about 50 years, mostly in silence, I had a spiritual awakening, deep experience at age 20, and after that I was trying to figure out what kind of a world we would live in, what kind of universe it is that would enable these kinds of experiences to happen. So I read a lot of philosophy and theology and so on, and I've gradually developed my own point of view over the years, and mostly haven't talked about it with anybody, so I wanted to write it down. What I came up with was a kind of version of what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, maybe Advaita Vedanta, in Western theology might be called panentheism. So I decided to write all this down. I've been working on it for years, and it's basically done. I can't think of anything else to say, mostly. And so that's the beliefs, what are my beliefs is what this was about. I call it Spirit Matters. If anyone's interested, it's on my website, or I can send you an updated copy of it. About 3 people have read it, at least claim to. It's not it didn't go viral. I think it bores people. It's kind of, but it's long. It's my magnum opus. It's 150 pages. So, but one of the beliefs that I deal with in this thing is God. And I fully admit that I haven't the slightest idea what I'm talking about when I use the word God, but I do use the word. And when I first started practice, this really concerned me because I had heard Buddhists don't do God, and they'll kind of look down on you if you do, or, you sort of keep it secret. And that bothered me because I was really enjoying coming here, going to Spirit Rock and Zen Center, and I really wanted to be in the club. This seems like a really dumb problem now, but 20 years ago it was very serious to me. And one time on a spiritual retreat, a meditation retreat, a men's retreat with Jack Kornfield, I decided to bring it up with him. So you get these little 10-minute meetings with the teacher, when you go on these retreats. So I sat down with him and I said, well, Jack, I have an issue. I'm really not sure that I can call myself a Buddhist. And he said, oh, why? And I said, well, and almost in a whisper, I believe in God. And when I said that, he went like this, and he sort of sailed out, right? He left his body and was just sort of in bliss. And I thought, well, that's a great answer, because that's kind of the experience I'm referring to when I use that word, right? And he, was out there in the wherever for a while, and he came back down, and he opened his eyes and looked at me and said, oh, I wouldn't worry very much about being a Buddhist. This from one of the foremost Buddhist teachers in North America. He said, become a Buddha. That is awaken. Become awake. And I really was surprised that he would. I thought he was going to debate the catechism with me or something. But it wasn't relevant to why we were there. It wasn't that practice is not about believing this or that big picture doctrine, which was new to me back then. And this is up for me now because I sort of, as I said, I finished this manuscript, and last September I realized there's nothing more to say. I've kind of said what I believe, and I'm done with it, and I put it aside, and it really is kind of put aside now. It doesn't occupy my attention that much anymore. And I realized, wow, I have spent 50 years of my life occupied with these questions. And how have I changed? How have I been transformed? The answer, not much, if at all. Well, a little bit maybe. A few changes have happened in my life, but not much. And so I realized, wow, I have really given a lot of importance to my beliefs, to believing things in my life. I'm a thinking type, and I guess that's part of why I do it, but it just interests me. Why have I done this? And it hasn't had that big an influence. I'm reminded of a story that the philosopher Bertrand Russell used to tell about an old dowager aunt that he had who was a staunch Christian, and somebody asked her, what do you suppose will happen to you after you die? And she said, well, I suppose that after I die, I shall inherit eternal happiness in heaven. But I wish you wouldn't talk about such unpleasant things. And I realize, that the experience of getting older and going to die and people dying around me and life, the bummers of life, that remains pretty much the same regardless of what I intellectually believe about their larger significance or where it all leads or anything. It doesn't change them much. But the promise of the Dharma is the end of suffering. I mean, that's a big promise. And the Dharma is more about how you deal with today, with this life, with this experience. And that's a very different kind of thing. So I'd like to talk about that, since I have some renewed interest in actually practicing it now that I'm done with, not so preoccupied with beliefs. In every culture that Buddhism goes into, it kind of takes on the color of that culture, takes on the metaphysical beliefs and the view. Tibetan Buddhism is wild, and in India it's a little more like Hinduism, and it's different in Japan. There are all kinds of cultural things that stick to it. But in every culture, people say that the core of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths, which is also what the Buddha said. I mean, in virtually every talk he ever gave, it was about some aspect of the Four Noble Truths. So what I'd like to do is get into what those are a little bit, and talk about what the Dharma actually is, partly to remind myself. So here is a modern translation of the Four Noble Truths. First noble truth: shit happens. And no, second, we make it worse. It's good, right? Third, we don't have to. 4, here's how. That's the whole deal. Then the how is the Eightfold Noble Path: right understanding, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. I got this, by the way, from Sylvia Boorstein, who says she learned it from a guy who teaches Buddhism in prisons. I didn't catch his name. If anyone recognizes this and wants to tell me, I'd like to know really where it comes from. Because I like it. I really like this view. It's so simple, and there's not much to argue about, The universal, inevitable arising of shit in our lives is something that, is anyone going to dispute? And then we make it worse, to elaborate, we make it worse because of the mind's imperative that things be different than they are, that life be different than it is. In one way or another, most of us as human beings are in contention with life, and the path is about learning non-contention with life, right? To elaborate a little on the Eightfold Path, the 8 parts of the path are usually divided into 3 sections: wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline. Wisdom is basically what we just said. Shit happens. It's about recognizing that, in a sense, there's me and there's the universe, and the universe is bigger. Do you remember when some of you are old enough to remember this? In the 80s, there was this joke, wry joke that people told to they said, you can get a perfect boyfriend, and you can get a perfect apartment, and you can get a perfect job. Remember this? You just can't get them all at the same time. Which I thought was funny because it made fun of the way most of us pursue happiness. I mean, I think happiness for most of us means that you get all the necessary elements of happiness together, the right degree, the right friend, whatever it is you need. You collect the whole thing, and then you nail it to the ground so that it doesn't move, and then you have this secure foundation of permanent happiness. Right? And that doesn't work because shit happens. There is no firm foundation. There is no, in religious terms, there is no rock of ages to stand on. That's a delusion. But I have believed that most of my life, that if I just get this and that, the struggle to sort of corral all the cats of existence into one little pen, what we actually need is not a rock of ages, but we need to learn the skill to swim or to surf, just to respond to what changes. You probably know Joseph Goldstein's metaphor for the path. You're skydiving. You jump out of the plane, and you suddenly realize you forgot to put on your parachute. But then you look down, and there's no ground, and that's our condition, right? And that's the wisdom component of the Dharma in a nutshell. And then, and these aren't in any particular order. It's a wheel, right? We're doing them all at the same time. The next part of the path is ethics. And ethics, too, is really very simple in Buddhism. There's one of the suttas that, the Pali Suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, is called Advice to Rahula, or Rahula, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. Rahula is the Buddha's 7-year-old son, and he and his mother have just joined this growing group following the Buddha. And so the Buddha is teaching Rahula the basics of the program. He's teaching these 3 things: wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline. Wisdom, he says, don't ever lie. Be always loyal to the truth. By the way, did you know Rahula? I've just been reading Rahula. You know what that means? I hope that I don't know whether this is true or not, but it's said that the term Rahula means fetter. He named his kid Fetter. Like son Fetter Gautama. I mean, I sometimes wonder about the Buddha as a dad. As a world teacher, he was great, but man, boy named Sue, But anyway, so he tells Fetter ethics. And for ethics, he teaches him, when you're considering saying something or doing something, ask yourself, does what I'm thinking of doing lead to more suffering, or does it lead to less suffering? He uses words like affliction and so on, but that's the basic meaning. Which way was it likely to lead? And then evaluate as you go while you're doing it and afterwards. Always asking yourself the question, more or less. And you always want to go toward less suffering and toward compassionate action. That's ethics. That's the whole thing. So I have found when I try to practice this, when I ask myself the question, it feels to me that I always know the answer. As soon as I ask the question, that's the way that I want to go over here, And but yes, I know the answer, and I'm not always right, but pretty much it's a guide. Inwardly what leads to more suffering and what leads to less suffering for yourself and others. And I think that's really all I need to ask myself. I can get into theoretical debates about it, like, well, what if it leads to less suffering for me but more suffering for others? And since I'm a thinking type, I can spin off on things like that. But what I have found in practice is I've never come into had a situation where that was the case. In the Buddhist understanding of suffering, if it leads to less suffering for me, it leads to less suffering for others too, right? So very simple. That's ethics. And then the third component of the Dharma is mental discipline, which usually means mindfulness practice to most people. Sit down and meditate and watch your breath. And of course, it doesn't mean just that at all, or it doesn't mean that at all. I found when I started teaching mindfulness practice to psychotherapy patients that a lot of people got hung up on the term mindfulness because mind has a lot of connotations in our culture. It connotes something kind of analytical, unemotional, maybe even cold, detached, as I'm contemplating my experience, but I'm just sort of even a little hostile to it, just above it all. I know that not everyone understands mindfulness that way, but that connotation does exist for many people. And in the Pali language, the term for mind and the term for heart are the same. Citta, they're the same. They didn't distinguish. Thought occurred here, not here, in the Buddhist culture, and so you could just as easily say practice heartfulness. And in fact, I tried in some experiments. I did it once here and then once at Mission Dharma, where we all meditated, and I gave meditated for a minute, and I gave two different instructions. One was be mindful of whatever is arising, and the other one is open your heart to whatever is arising. And then we compared the meditation afterwards, and almost everybody said the heartful instruction allowed them to feel deeper in their meditation, to go more into it, to be more fully engaged with it. And so this is a kind of an interesting thing that I noticed. And it really is consistent with what the Buddha taught. The mindfulness part is a translation of the term sati, the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness. And sati really means something more like recollectedness, which is the element of presence in practice. You want to be present to what's happening. But not just present the way an accountant is present to a ledger, The idea of presence is open-hearted presence, a presence that is loving, that is compassionate, that is accepting, that is not emotionless. It's a commitment of the whole being that's what the mental discipline is. I've heard that Jack Kornfield no longer even uses the term mindfulness. I don't know whether that's true. He talks about loving awareness. So the mental discipline is to learn loving awareness. I like the term loving presence or heartfulness. We're stuck with the term mindful. I mean, that's what we've got. But to remember this, I think, is important about it to in terms of what we're really trying to do in practice. It's tremendous, I wrote it down. The goal of mental discipline is to develop a heart boundless in its love, responsive to the suffering of the world, joyful when it meets the happiness of others, and balanced when facing the inevitable ups and downs of life. And we do this, we're enjoined to do this, not because you'll go to heaven if you do, or get a better lifetime next time around, but just because, why not? What better way is there to live? What more sane way to live? What more ennobling way to live? That's my whole act. We've got plenty of time to have a conversation. I have a few other things I could talk about, but that was basically what I wanted to say today. So, thank you very much. Comments, questions? Sir?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Can you say a few words? Because I understand the mindful side of the Eightfold Path, also the concentration element to it.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Because for me personally, past 9 months, year, I really realized I needed to exercise that skill.
Which is concentration?
Concentration. Just for me, for the awareness to take root more, or to be able to even tap into awareness more.
Yes.
It's just the more single-pointed focus. And I found that for me personally, that's been my path towards more open, heartful,
yes.
heart-minded, heartfulness.
Yes.
Through a concentration practice has made it possible.
Yeah, well, that's thank you for reminding us of that, because I think that is a vital step, which I didn't even mention, concentration. And that's been my experience too, that when the mind is all agitated and jumping from like a monkey from one tree to tree, you don't get anywhere. And so we do things like focus on the breath or a mantra or a candle or whatever it is you're focusing on to bring the mind to some kind of one-pointedness. And then, but that's what I think is important to remember, is that that's a means, not an end. It isn't like my goal is to have 10 consecutive breaths without wandering, or 2.5 in my case usually. The purpose of that is to still the mind so that these other things can occur, right? I mean, is that? Yeah. That's kind of my view of it.
So you haven't mentioned the belly center. How does that come to your practice, or does it?
The belly center. I don't do much belly centered work. Would you want to talk about that?
My experience is they focus on embodiment is very profound.
To be here.
Yeah, the belly center, which is then all sensation. It's the immediate belly, but it's all sensation in the body. And that's a foundation then to open my heart and to enter into an expansive
Great.
sense of presence, experience of presence.
I haven't done that practice much, but I think I made it a little bit years ago. But the one that helps me the most is here, more the heart center. I get all the same results that you're talking about from that. And one of the things, if I just bring my attention here, it's very strange. The heart's chakra and so on. I know how I'm feeling more just by paying attention there. And if I'm having trouble with compassion, if I just put my hand on my heart, often that will just evoke it. It will make possible a little more tender approach to my experience. And then here, I've done this is more trippy though. I won't get into that. Sir?
I'd like to ask a question that is a little off the topic, but it's always kind of puzzled me about Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the idea of somehow that central to at least the idea of the Buddha, as I understand it, is some process of reincarnation.
Yeah. Rebirth, yeah.
And as a product of the modern world, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you have any thoughts on it, and what it means in terms of the spiritual life.
Yeah, good question. Rebirth. Well, that's a belief, and it was a belief that everyone accepted took for granted at the Buddha's time, and as far as we can tell from the early suttas, he did too. He was also asked at one time, somebody asked him, well, what if I don't believe in any life after death at all? And he asked the guy, well, how would you live your life if you don't? How do you live your life? And he said, well, because I only have this chance, I want to love the people I love, and and then he said, and if you did believe, he said, well, then I want to love and give because I want a better life. What he led the guy to see was that you live a good life either way. That he would not make any difference as to how he would live his life. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier about beliefs. In terms of rebirth, it kind of depends. Personally, it depends on which day you catch me. I don't know. I mean, I've read a lot of stuff about Ian Stevenson's work. There was research that's, of children's past life memories and stuff. It's very interesting. It doesn't prove anything. I find it basically a kind of an irrelevant question. In fact, to get into stuff like this, it leads to attachment to views, one of the 4 causes of suffering. And it just seems to me to be kind of a waste of time. I did a talk here on rebirth one time when I was all studying it and writing my thing. And I asked how many people believe in rebirth, how many people don't, and how many people are agnostic about it. Virtually everyone in the room doesn't believe it. It was just like, I would think that would be true. Do you want to say how many people believe in rebirth?
Can you define rebirth?
Well, you come back as some form. I mean, that's as far as I want to go with it. Rebirth, you believe in it? 1, 2, 3. That's a little more than
It's
before.
how you define
Over here,
I think
too.
it's not.
Over here too. Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that about you, Glenn.
Well, I figure either you're dead and nothing happens, and I can't believe that with the intelligence that the human spirit shows, or else you're the Christian death where you're just locked like a fly in amber and it's kind of effectively bliss where you never change. Or other alternative is everything is changed and evolving and devolving, so this is the life force gets picked up in another body makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm 100% sure about that, but that's what's logical.
Uh-huh.
What do you believe?
Well, I wrote a whole section on it in that Spirit Matters manuscript, and I went through all the evidence. There's several streams of supposed evidence for reincarnation. One is the past life memories of children.
Yeah.
Because some young children do seem to remember former lives, and this psychiatrist was given Ian Stevens was given a grant by the creator of Xerox to spend his whole life going around the world studying these people, and he came up with cases that he thought were suggestive that reincarnation is real. So there's that. Then past life regression and hypnotherapy, which you can, in this town for a fee, you can find people to regress you to your former lives. I have been through that process. I went to a workshop. I obligingly remembered 2 former lives. Virtually everybody in the workshop of 50, except 2, remembered former lives. I don't think that proves that none of that constitutes scientific proof.
Well, I'm not about proof. I'm just thinking about
Belief.
belief.
Yeah, what seems most logical. My fundamental belief is that some part of us never dies. And if it never dies, well, then what happens to it? It seems like it's got to do something. And so incarnate in somewhere, somehow, as something, seems to be the next logical step. That's where I go. I pretty much believe that some part of us never dies.
I saw this Ellen DeGeneres show where she had this 5-year-old kid playing concert-level piano. And I'm thinking, that kid couldn't have learned all those techniques when he's like 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
That must have been something that came over from her earlier existence. Or at least that makes the most sense.
Yeah. Or Mozart.
Yeah.
Then there's a man, what's it, Dharma? Oh, I can't remember the guy's name. It's really interesting. He was he lived in Sri Lanka, I believe, a young kid. And he, around age 2, he started sitting up and chanting these things that nobody could recognize. And he would go on for hours and then go into deep meditation, age 2. And then, and he got better at it as he aged to like 4. And so they brought monks to visit him. And these monks recognized that the language he was chanting was some kind of archaic, no longer used Tibetan language that they could recognize because they'd studied it. And he was getting these hour-long chants perfectly. And the sound of him chanting, you can access it on the internet. I did it. I wish I could remember to give you a link. I could send it to anyone who's interested. And I listened to some of this stuff. It's gibberish to me, but it's beautiful. It's melodic, this kid chanting this stuff. And he grew up to become a Buddhist teacher in his own right. So there are these experiences. No skeptic will be convinced by them if you're, I think. But I'm open to the possibility. But for me, more and more as I get older, it really does feel freeing not to worry about any of it. I have my beliefs, but here we are, and how are we going to live this hour with each other in this moment? I mean, that really is kind of what the special genius of the Buddha was, right? Even though he did believe, he was always telling people where they were in their former lives, and he was visiting people on other planes of existence and talking to gods, He was not a modern empirical rationalist, it just wasn't, even though the Dharma is very consistent with modern ways of thinking. That's why it's so popular.
Well, I'm also just thinking, do we have one shot at life, if we're lucky, maybe up to 80 years, to figure it all out? And I think that's pretty hard.
And then you expire, yeah.
As opposed to we just keep on learning. Like, I made some good decisions in my life now. I made some dumbass decisions.
Yeah.
So I don't go to hell or heaven. I just pick up the ball next lifetime and try to learn the stuff I didn't learn this lifetime.
Yeah, I like that. I'm in favor of that. I mentioned earlier God. I think that the idea of I sometimes think of the people in the Holocaust that were shoved into the gas chambers and suffocated. Was it really true that their last experience of existence was the triumph of murderous insanity, and that was it? I like to believe that some part of them continued and that they went on. I like to believe that. It just seems like a more just universe. I like to believe it, and the spiritual experiences I had an awakening starting at age 20, which suggests to me that there is some part of us that is outside of time altogether, and is never touched by what happens in time. I love that, but then there's time, and anyway, so yeah, I like that.
Good. I give it to you.
Thank you, sir.
This may be sort of meditation 101, but when I meditate, I do the breathing, and when my mind wanders, I start again. It's one. And when you talk about open-heartedness toward what comes up, it feels like that would just be, sort of becoming aware of what, how I'm judging my thought, and it just seems like it would be a path away from staying centered.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that sort of more like after you meditate, you think about it and try to be open-minded or open-hearted about it, or is it all just really quick?
It's always the case that you should do what works for you, and I don't think it's just 101. I count breaths too, and sometimes more than others, because sometimes some periods of time my mind is really scattered. So focusing and collecting is really an important part of it. Breathing, relaxing, and then if I'm in a particularly hard-hearted place, I'll often practice metta meditation, and I'll do it when I'm going to give a talk too, because I'm sitting here facing all you guys and I'm a little anxious. I can't, just go into samadhi here. I'll go through the people in my life and send them loving kindness, and it helps, So it's situational. Other times, I just want to be quiet and listen. But I guess what I was trying to get at is, even when you're watching breathing, there is an attitude toward our experience we can have that's kind of open, gentle, accepting. Watch for the critical thoughts. Have you told yourself I'm not breathing right? I'm breathing too shallow. Try, and make it into a thing. Make it into a struggle with myself. And if I'm making it into a struggle, then notice, okay, I'm struggling right now with my experience. Well, that's interesting. What's that like? Oh, that's suffering. Oh, wow, I'm suffering. In other words, a curiosity and an openness and if I'm judging, then at least don't judge the judging. It's an attitude, and I think it was what the Buddha was teaching.
understand that opposite. The open-heartedness for me felt really relieving. When you said that, all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, because my mind is so crazy.
Yeah, mine too.
And so that when I could just go, oh, open-heartedness, it just means I can be compassionate and not pay so much attention to
Yes.
what the talking is, but I could actually feel safer if I just opened my heart. That's how I felt.
Yes.
For myself, I just wanted to share that experience. It
Yes.
felt good. When you said it was very relieving. It was like a
Oh,
different
great,
frame
great.
I've never tried before.
Well, that's often my experience too. And, that I'm not trying to do something here. Meditation is more about being rather than doing. And if we have a compassionate attitude, we're more into being. You know what? There was something I forgot to read that, in terms of ethics and also with compassion, that I think is kind of cool. When I was talking about, are you moving towards suffering or away from suffering? Larry Yang has a little thing he asks himself when he's in his life. So here what he says is, may I hold my experiences with loving awareness. If I can't be loving in the moment, can I be kind? If I can't be kind, can I be non-judgmental? If I can't be non-judgmental, can I not cause harm? If I can't avoid causing harm, can I at least cause the least amount of harm possible? Really beautiful, Just it's very gentle. I'm inclining my mind and my behavior toward compassion and away from suffering, and recognizing that I can't do it perfectly. What can I do right now that goes that way rather than that way? Sir.
Hi, thanks, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested about what you said about choosing action that lessens your suffering and the suffering of others. And what I find is that you can take an action, you cannot take an action, and then you have to decide what action. And life is pretty complex, and we also have a lot of delusion and greed.
Yeah.
So how do you see things clearly enough in order to take the appropriate action? I mean, I think even in arguments I've had with somebody I've known where I've had a good intention and thought I saw a situation right, took an action, and it caused suffering.
Yeah.
So I think, and not to mention big issues like the Middle East or larger issues. How do you decide what action to take?
Well, there really is, the only answer I can give is that that's why we practice. In other words, if I sit quietly every day, I'm trying to do it 3 times a day these days, and am just here and just try to hold my experience in loving awareness. My behavior afterwards, I think, is a little wiser. And I still make mistakes, I still screw up, I still generate shit in my life. But I a little less, and I think that's all. That's all we can expect of ourselves, that we do the very best we can. But it's really important to spend time working on the mind, working on being quiet, listening, open, however you conceive it, whatever practice, counting breaths, meditate, whatever it is, that we do that regularly. And that's it. That's the only answer I have to that. Sure.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that whole, elusive concept of karma. That everything's the effect of a cause. And that's what comes to my mind. And that what I remember being taught was that we have no control over the results of our actions, and because they're influenced by so many other things in the world. But it's our intention, and the action or speech itself,
yes,
and the ethics that goes with it, that we can control.
Yes.
And that we should be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
That if we are open-hearted and friendly in our
Yeah. Well, all we can control is really our own intentions, basically. I mean, you intend, and then you do, and then what happens, happens. And it's all out of my hands from then on. And then I try to learn from, if I'm being mindful or heartful, oh, well, that didn't work very well. I should do this maybe instead, But that's just the best way to find our way in this. We're not expecting so much of ourselves. Well, it's expecting a lot, though. I take it back. Expecting a lot to sit quietly, do nothing, and observe with loving awareness. That's a lot. And I really do think that's about the best thing we can do for ourselves and the world. If you don't do that, you're gonna mess things. You're gonna create problems. Yeah.
Tom, I remember hearing from a number of teachers that the Buddha said there were 3 things that, if you try and figure it out, would unhinge the mind. And do you remember what they were? I think it was karma, rebirth, and the existence of God.
Not the existence of God. It was, karma. He said, if you try to understand karma, you're just going to give yourself a headache. Is what he said. Does anyone remember? There's some Buddhist scholars in here, I know.
Karma's the origin of things.
Karma's the only one you know?
The origin of things.
The origin of things.
Of existence.
Try to figure out the origin of existence. Yeah. Yeah. I solved that one.
It's intriguing to think about there being no distinction between heart and mind.
Yes.
And it's almost like what you just said about, it's almost imponderable to think about how those two could be combined, because we so often say, what do you think? How do you feel? And then if they're combined, what would the question be?
Yeah. I know.
What do you know?
But I think there's that's our cultural conditioning. Our cultural conditioning is that we think they're separate. They're really not that separate. Or that we think in our heads. We don't know that, by the way. But anyway, we tend to experience ourselves as in here. I'm in here. That's where my identity is. And I think that's just it's partly because our senses, our eyes, ears, our senses are so focused in here that the data is coming in. But other cultures, they don't experience themselves that way. I'm told in Native American cultures the center of the being was here. It certainly was true in India. You're here. It feels a little better to think that way too, by the way. To focus in here.
I think we have time for one more.
One more. You're the last one. Oh,
I'm reading a book by Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller. Every Day is an Atheist Holiday.
Yeah.
And, it's a funny title. I'm not looking to become an atheist, but it occurred to me by applying what you've been talking about and what's been talked about here so much, that idea that every day being an atheist holiday goes from being a joke to providing wisdom of just being every day, being present in every day, and it becomes a more fun holiday experience.
Great, well said.
Maybe one. Do you have a question, Kat?
I was just, I guess I was curious about your conception of God. Like, one of the things about Buddhism that really appeals to me is not having this controlling father figure, judging, or even like supporting and protecting. And so, if you wanted to share anything about the way you conceive God.
I wrote on that endlessly. Well, basically, most people conceive of God as the supreme being. But in Vedanta and in panentheism, God is not a being, but being itself. So there is no the boss or the great borderline personality in the sky from the Old Testament, going. There is nothing like that, which is why so many people hate the term God. They hate that, that they've had to experience fear and stuff growing up. So the term God to me means something about a sense of total connectedness with all being. And there's nobody pushing you around. So I like that. The belief itself warms my heart. So I don't feel, and I don't care whether anyone else agrees with it or not, or whether they think it's just meaningless. What do you mean being itself? A philosopher, a modern philosopher might say, that's gibberish. Okay, I can live with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Here.
And thank you, by the way. When I talk about the God thing, I worry about that a little bit because there are people who've been really wounded by religion and God and all that stuff. So it was well received. I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you very much. So next Sunday is the first Sunday of the month. If you would like to come and join us a half an hour early, starting at 10 a.m., we will have a chanting session. Everyone's welcome. If you have any simple chants that you might want included, please see me afterwards. And then next Sunday, instead of a scheduled speaker, we have scheduled a small group discussion where we'll break into small groups.
Could Prasadna cheat in next week?
Oh, it will? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at the print. Thank you.
Yes.
So
Prasadna cheat in
this
is going to be with us.
Good. That relieves me of having to come up with a topic. Do you know what his topic will be?
I don't. I just know he said he did change. Remember, you're supposed to come this month.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Dana is the Pali word for giving. It's what sustains our Sangha and everything that we do here, renting this wonderful space and our newsletter and our outreach to prisoners and our monthly feeding homeless youth. So please be generous. There's a Dana Bowl out there. Suggest a donation of $5 or more is very welcome and appreciated. Do we have a host? Oh.
I just have another announcement. Last week, the talk was on joy, and I belong to James Barra's Sangha in Berkeley. And next Tuesday, he begins his Awakening Joy course, which you can go to Berkeley and hear him live, or you can hear, I think there's some sort of audio simulcast, or you can just listen to the tapes. And it's a 10-week course, and I've done it, and some other people here have done it. And if you're interested in joy, it's a good way to explore it. And I'll put some cards out there on the cadenza that are cards he has for the course. And also, I found a shirt that I never wore. I didn't even know I had, and I'm going to put that on the cadenza too. It's a brand new shirt, like 1635 is the size, and
thank you, Paul.
It's a striped shirt. If you want to take a look at that, you can have that.
Good. George.
I'm your host. There's hot water for tea, thanks to Tom Bruein. And here we talked about Dana. I brought some organic Cara navel oranges. Please help yourself to those. And some people meet at the door at 12:30 to go out for lunch. If you're interested in that. And we have a sign-up sheet on the credenza. Thank you.
David.
Hi. I just wanted to thank the group for their support and wisdom over the years. I'm continuing the journey in St. Pete, Florida in 2 weeks. And I'm looking back over the last 20, 30 years, and many years I've been in this group and many things shared with people in this group. And this was significant, and I just want to thank all you guys for your support and wisdom.
You will definitely be missed, but you'll come back periodically, won't you?
I will, to get out of the heat.
David.
I think it's next Saturday. There's a Two-Spirit powwow at Formation Center. There's a Bay Area Two-Spirit organization, and for those who don't know, like in the Native American First Nation traditions in America, Two-Spirit signifies people considered LGBTQ folks, but it's something that's been growing. So for those who might be interested in supporting them, as well as seeing another part of our country and our brothers and sisters that's taking place. And it's a lot on, if you just look up Bay Area Two-Spirit, you'll find out more online.
Cool. And that's Sunday? Or
I think it's Saturday.
Saturday, okay. Thank you.
At 4 minutes Sunday.
Thank you. Other announcements? Okay, let's gather in a circle for our dedication marriage.
I'm glad you and I read about all about the times. No, you didn't.
So, remembering Joe Kukulka, who helped spread the Dharma. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.